Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Barry, and I would like to welcome you to today's Botanical Briefing, bringing into focus the Seeing the Invisible exhibition at Historic Spanish Point. Before we proceed and I introduce our speakers today, I have a pre-recorded introduction and welcome from our President and CEO, Jennifer Romanecki.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Romanecki, President and CEO of Marie Selby Botanical Gardens. And we're so thrilled that you're tuning in today to learn more about Seeing the Invisible. This is the first exhibition of its kind to be developed as a collaboration among botanical gardens around the world. Seeing the Invisible was initiated by the Jerusalem Botanical Gardens and Outset Contemporary Art Fund, and is co-curated by Hadass Mayor and Tal Michael Herring with support of the Jerusalem Foundation. I did want to mention that my dear friend James Snyder, Executive Chairman of the Jerusalem Foundation, is the reason that Selby Gardens was able to participate. He thought of us for this project, and we're just so thrilled that we could be involved. Enjoy the program. Thank you. Hello.
All right. I'm excited to take the time today to discuss with you, and I'm delighted to be joined by two colleagues, this incredible exhibition that has been running at Historic Spanish Point since September. As mentioned previously, my name is David Barry. I am the Vice President for Visitor Engagement and Chief Museum Curator at Marie Selby Botanical Gardens, and joined today by my colleague, my partner in crime on all things exhibition related, Kelsie Childs, who's the manager and registrar for museum exhibitions at Marie Selby Botanical Gardens. And we are both really excited to be joined by our colleague, Hannah Rendell, from the Jerusalem Botanical Gardens. Hannah is the Executive Director of Strategic Development at the Jerusalem Botanical Gardens, and is a key figure in the development and the implementation of this project. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to her to give you a little bit of background to the project and to its scope. Hannah, thank you.
Thank you so much, David. And thank you also to the Marie Selby team for inviting me to join today in your botanical briefing. If we move to the next slide, I can tell you a little bit about how this project was first initiated. We at the Jerusalem Botanical Gardens just came out of the first lockdown, where we had a sculpture exhibition called Returning to Nature. And we really found that with all the museums and galleries closed in Israel, which I'm sure you guys have experienced there as well, everybody was kind of craving culture. And we found that by doing exhibitions in the garden at the time, the gardens was packed with people, which was great and wonderful to bring so many people to the botanical gardens that had never visited before. But we also felt the responsibility to do something really, really new and innovative, and something that hadn't yet been done by the galleries and museums that were closed, in order to really be giving them more than just an outside location. So we thought of augmented reality, and I do confess that when Candida from Outset Contemporary Art Fund came up with the idea of augmented reality, I had to Google search it, because I had no idea what augmented reality meant, which is crazy to me now that we've opened the largest ever augmented reality exhibition. So when finding out what augmented reality was, I said to her, most definitely botanical gardens are perfect locations for such a thing, mainly being that, you know, which will explain exactly what it is later in this presentation, but spoiler alert, it means that we will not be destroying any of the preservations or having to worry about large machinery coming in and changing anything and bringing in large-scale sculptures, not having to fight with our maintenance teams and our horticulturalists as to where we're putting things, and generally making everyone who actually works and cares about the garden much happier with the fact that our art exhibition wasn't being intrusive. And so once I started to work out what it was, I said to Candida, listen, you know, if we're going to do it in Jerusalem and everything doesn't really exist in its space, why not look for other botanical gardens to join us? We found, first of all, we found a tech company that lives and works in Denmark. In Israel, we did not have the tech yet that was actually used to working with artists of the kind of caliber that we wanted to bring in. And up until today, mostly augmented reality has been used in the commercial field. So it's still very new in the contemporary art field. So we found an organization or a company called Cora Contemporary, and started to get a budget from them and realized, yes, we definitely need to do this with other botanical gardens. This is definitely not a one-man show or one-woman show. And so we started to reach out. So if we go to the next slide, I believe you will see the botanical gardens. Oh, it's going to be the one after that. So before we reached out to the botanical gardens, we onboarded both Hadass Maor and Tal Michael Haring, which Jennifer introduced as the two curators. And I do want to say one thing about these two curators. Hadass has extensive experience working with very, very internationally acclaimed and successful artists, and has a wonderful, wonderful network. But no prior knowledge in tech, augmented reality, virtual reality, anything like this. Whereas Tal came from the tech world of augmented and virtual reality. So the conversations between Tal and Hadass the whole way through this project have been super interesting. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But the fact that both of these two people, you know, where art, nature, and tech can actually meet, and the arguments that they had throughout the year in each piece of work was absolutely fascinating. So once we had those in place, they set to work finding 13 internationally acclaimed artists, and I set to work finding 12 botanical garden partners. So then we managed to go across 6 countries: Australia, Canada, Israel, South Africa, United Kingdom, and the United States. We had a few different specifications in mind for our partners, mainly that they had experience running art exhibitions and great art exhibitions. And they really were of a high standard in this. That was very important to us. Also that they wanted to be part of an incredible team throughout the year that would think together and work together. And also that they weren't too close together, so that the exhibition could be nice and spread out. So these are our partners. You'll be introduced to the artists soon by Kelsie, I believe, or by David. And I'm here throughout the presentation. I'm excited to hear and answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you. And that brings up a great point, which Kelsie had told me to mention at the beginning, and I have, as usual, forgotten, which is that we are very happy to answer questions, but we're going to sort of table them until the end. I am going to address as well as I can the issue that Hannah raised earlier, which is what, of course, is augmented reality. We hear this and other related terms and probably nod our heads in agreement so that no one asks us to explain. But we figured, because this is sort of the crux of the matter, we'd take a minute and provide an explanation. So augmented reality, or AR, is an interactive experience of a real-world environment in which the physical objects that occupy a given space are enhanced with computer-generated sounds and images. Very technical explanation. I will simplify it in a second. It's helpful to counter augmented reality with another, perhaps even better known or more widely circulated term, which is virtual reality. And these two things differ because virtual reality, or in virtual reality, the viewer is completely immersed in a virtual environment. We're familiar with the sort of the image of someone kind of what looks like fumbling around in the dark with the goggles on. The easiest way to think about this, and we'll illustrate the point. Here are two photographs to illustrate augmented reality. The way that this was first explained to me was that you could have an ancient Greek vase placed on your dining room table in your house, and that you use a device like a phone or a tablet, and you sort of wave it in front of you, and magically appearing on your dining room table in your dining room is this beautiful vase from ancient Greece. Everything else is the same, and you've layered in that element. So in these illustrations, you can see someone holding up their phone to the fountain at Historic Spanish Point near the pergola and near White Cottage. And you can see a work by Sarah Meojas, which is clearly not in the physical view. So we've layered in the work into the physical environment. The image on the right, this is Rafika Anadal, Machine Hallucinations. Kelsie is there in the flesh. The work to her right is a figment of augmented reality. And she is viewing that, and someone in this case is viewing her. This differs from virtual reality, where you don the goggles, and instead of seeing an ancient Greek vase on your dining room table, you are transported to ancient Greece. This would be the easiest way to think about it. Or in this case, the individual dons the goggles and they're transported to outer space. So this is fully immersive. Your dining room table, your dining room, your house go away, and all you see in your field of view is another world, another place, another time. I'm no doubt I have made that worse in my explanation than better, but happy to answer questions as we move forward. Kelsey's going to talk us through a little bit about how the app, which is the kind of mechanism through which this is experienced, works on site.
Thanks, David. So the app is required to experience the exhibition at Historic Spanish Point. The app itself is called Seeing the Invisible, just like the exhibition. So whether you're using a phone or a tablet, depending on which brand, you'll find the app in the Apple Store or in Google Play. We recommend, as much as possible, if you can download the app at home prior to arriving to Historic Spanish Point. If you don't have it on your tablet or phone when you arrive, you can download it there. We do have Wi-Fi at the garden site, so it's important to connect to the Wi-Fi when you arrive. I believe there's not a password required for that, and it's called Gardens Guest. The app is accessible at home. So when you're at home, you can do some prior research, reading about the artist and more about the project. But in order to access the actual routes of the exhibition's works, you need to be on site because they've been GPS located there. In order to use the app, we do ask that you give the app access to your device's camera, microphone, and GPS. All of these things work together so that the app actually functions correctly. So as I mentioned, the works have been GPS located. So that's why they don't work at home. You can only see the artist information at home. You can't see the actual works. So we've designated a path throughout the 30 acres of the garden site and specifically spent many trips to Historic Spanish Point finding exactly where we want that artwork to be placed. So the artwork is, if you think about it, we've created a pin on the map, and within a 20-foot radius of that pin, the artwork, about 15 to 20 feet, that artwork can be accessed when you're on site. What is fun about the artworks is that some of them you can walk through, some of them have an audio component. They're all interactive and immersive in different ways. Again, each artist kind of created their own work separately from each other. So what connects them is this theme of nature and people and community, but they don't exactly speak to one another directly. So everyone is completely unique and different. We do recommend that you have headphones with you, but if you don't and you're just playing it from your phone audio, sometimes it's fun to hear what other people are experiencing at the same time that you're experiencing it. But just be mindful of your sound. If there's a group of 15 people all standing within a 20-foot radius, it may be difficult to hear. So it kind of depends on the user what your preference is. So to actually use the app, you'll have your phone and you'll open the app and connect to the internet when you're on site. And you'll go to a section in the app called Routes, and you'll see the path that we've designated. And along that path are blue markers, I believe, that indicate where the artwork is specifically located. And once you get into that radius of your first artwork, you'll see, as you see on the screen here, a notification that says establish artwork. So you'll select establish artwork and it'll load. And the first thing you'll be asked to do is to rotate your phone to scan the ground. So I recommend holding your phone just like you're taking a photo or a video and kind of rotating it side to side and scan up and down. And from my understanding of the technology, which is a very basic understanding, is that what the phone is doing is reading the horizontal plane so that the artwork can be placed correctly once you select where it's located. So after scanning for several moments, you'll get a notification that says scan successful. And then from here, what you'll see is kind of an orange cone, a circled radius spot. And wherever that is located and you tap on your phone is where that artwork will be placed. So you are kind of curating your own experience in a way, because you can kind of decide where in that radius that you want your artwork to be located. So you're pretty much curating. So you may put it in a different spot that someone else puts it in the same area. And once you've selected where you've located, just as you see here on the screen, on your individual device is where you'll see the artwork that you've placed. And it's really fun to think about the international aspect of this project, that you're placing an artwork, someone in another state or even in another country could be looking at that same artwork in a different site. So it's kind of fun to think about how we're all connected through this one app and project.
One just sort of point to add, one of the challenges, probably the primary challenge that has come up in terms of user experience on site has to do with the actual placement of the object with that target that Kelsie mentioned. Generally, in one's enthusiasm, when it comes up, we're very quick to hit the target, and sometimes our phone is pointed at the ground as opposed to sort of in the field out in front. And what, in effect, the viewer is doing is dropping the artwork on themselves. So the better thing to do is to try to push that target a little bit further out into your field of view, and then place the piece so that you can see it from a little bit of a distance. And as Kelsie mentioned, these are fully sort of immersive and interactive. They're three-dimensional, so you can walk around them. In a number of instances, you can walk through them. And some of them respond to you based on your proximity to the placement point. So it's really dynamic, but it does help if you give it a little bit of breathing room and walk up to it, as opposed to as soon as the target arrives, enthusiastically placing it wherever it might be, which could be on you or your friend or somewhere up in a tree, which we've done a couple of times as well. So that placement within that radius is key.
And if you don't like, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, if you're not happy with where the artwork's been placed, you can see on this screen a little bit, there's a small X. So you can reset the artwork if you're not happy with where it's placed or kind of want to see what it may look like closer to a tree or on a branch. So it's fun to play with. You can curate it in several different locations in the same area.
Do you mind, Kelsie, if I add a little bit to that?
Not at all.
Just the fact that even putting that refresh button was part of this collaborative process where you had the 12 gardens all finding the same problems and the same issues of all sending us pictures of artworks up trees instead of placed on the ground. And we realized that really not very many people knew how to use this technology. So even in the starting weeks of opening, we were still improving the app continuously to understand the real customer and visitor experience going along, which is wonderful, because like we're all learning it together at the same time with our visitors as well and working out. And what we're finding is the first exhibition, the first artwork that you place, you're really having fun with it. You're really like trying to work out how to use the technology. And then after that, you've got 12 bits of artwork, which you can really start engaging in, because by then you'll be pros already.
And Kelsie can confirm, when we were out doing the initial testing of placements, using the beta version of the app, we kept placing the Sarah Mayohas piece, the piano, in a tree behind us, accidentally, not understanding exactly how the system worked, having to figure out where it had gone, and then ultimately figuring out how to get it out of the tree and where we had intended to place it. So even for those who were more directly involved in the process, there was a steep learning curve, but it was great fun, and we learned a lot in the process. Kelsie, you want to talk a little bit about the placement around the site?
Yeah, definitely. So we were tasked by Hannah and her team to walk our site, provide photos of where we thought the artworks would make sense to go. And this was really fun, as both David and I were relatively new to Selby Gardens at the time. It was a really nice introduction to the historic Spanish Point site. And we were mindful of the feedback from the curators and the artist intentions of the landscape they were looking for. Excuse me. And we were also mindful of the different landmarks that already existed at Historic Spanish Point. So it was a nice opportunity to think of the exhibition as a new layer to Historic Spanish Point, and ways we can highlight the entire 30 acres of the site by placing the works in strategic places. It was really fun. For example, one of the artworks the artist wanted, and the curators, a desert-like landscape. And we were like, well, we're in Florida. We don't really have a desert landscape. We were able to find a nice spot at the point that has a shell layer on the topsoil. And even though there's the beach behind it, or the bay, it actually worked out really nicely. And there's a serpent kind of sliding through and a cactus skeleton. And it doesn't really make sense in a logical way, but from an artistic perspective, it actually looks really beautiful. So it was a really fun experience with David and with the team. Yeah.
Yeah, a case of it's better to be lucky than good, because we didn't know at the time when we placed it on that little shell patch near the water that the title of the piece, this is by Jakob Steensen, is called Water Serpent. And when we learned that, we were like, yes, it was sort of meant to be, despite the fact it's a desert cactus. This all sort of makes sense. So it was really a great way to get to know the campus, going out with Kelsie to figure out the placement, and working with Hannah and with Michael and with Hadass. We learned a great deal through the process, both about the site, but also about how all this was going to work and how our visitors were going to experience this as it sort of unfolds from stop to stop throughout the campus. We no doubt also greatly entertained our colleagues as we're walking around with our phones, looking very intently at what, at least from their perspective, was nothing in particular in open space. But of course, it all made sense when we opened the exhibition a couple of months later. And with that, what we thought we would do is kind of introduce the artists, and we've picked about half the works to highlight, and leaving the others for you to fully explore on your own. But this is the group of 13 artists. It is an extraordinary group of very well established and sort of emerging artists working in very different genre. And from very different parts of the world, from Japan, from Scandinavia, from the United States, from the Middle East, really all over, artists from Israel, from the UK, that work globally as well. So an incredibly dynamic group. And we hope that you'll get a sense of that as we introduce a couple of the artists and their works to you. The first one that we wanted to mention is probably the best known name in the list, one of the world's leading contemporary artists and really cultural figures, I would say, Ai Weiwei. Chinese artist, really of international renown. It works in many different genres, and is also known as an activist, curator, filmmaker, and architect. The piece that you can experience at Historic Spanish Point and in the 11 other gardens around the world is an AR version of what was a physical sculptural piece dating from 2017, Gilded Cage. And it's an extraordinary work. It's sort of large bird cage-like structure in gold, and it references structures of power and division. And the goal is to sort of provoke discussions on issues relating to borders and immigration, sort of freedom and confinement, depending on where you are in relation to the piece and your view from your location. This is a photograph of the physical sculpture in New York, just at one of the entry points to Central Park in 2017. And what's really extraordinary in the case of the conversion is this was a fully kind of interactable piece. You can step into it, push through turnstiles, and it gives you many, many different points of view. You can obviously stand outside and look in, but you can stand inside and look out, look up. And it really gives you, you become very aware and very conscious of space, of freedom, and again, of confinement as you sort of move through this bar-like structure. This is the conversion. So this is the augmented reality version near White Cottage on the Point, just about whatever it is, 10, 15 minutes south of where I'm currently sitting. And it's equally dynamic. So this is, again, a piece that one can step into, push the turnstiles, look up through, look across at the bay. And it does raise questions in this wide open sort of dramatic landscape. It really does. If one takes a minute and stops and considers, it raises those questions that we just identified. And it makes you very sort of conscious of where you are in relation to the piece. Hannah, do you have any thoughts, or Kelsie, any thoughts you want to add to this?
I would add from a very personal take on this. Obviously, I'm not one of the curators, but as soon as it appeared in the garden, before we actually had this in the exhibition, we actually went to Portugal, where Ai Weiwei lives, and had to project it into his personal back garden so that he would experience it before he gave us permission to go ahead and use it in the exhibition. And the differences are, when you're walking around this piece, there's a sound element. So you push revolving doors and you can hear them move and you feel like you walk around inside them. But as you can see from these pictures, you can actually see the garden behind and in between the rails. And taking this piece and putting it into botanical gardens raises all of these questions about, you know, being inside a golden cage and still being able to look through and see the environment around you. And how people responded walking inside it, and how they, you know, if you watch people walking around in a circle when you can't see the golden cage, but they're trapped. And are they trapped by their phones? Are they trapped by, you know, something real or something imaginary? It really is, you know, you become, as a person experiencing it on your phone, you become part of the narrative of this piece. And that I really loved about this.
Mm-hmm. Kelsie, anything to add?
No, I just appreciate Hannah sharing that. I didn't know that you actually got to receive Ai Weiwei's approval in that way. That sounds like a really fun experience.
And we've touched on it before, but this is a great moment to kind of reiterate the point, which is that as you are interacting with this work in this location, it's very possible that visitors to our other partnering institutions around the world are engaging with the same piece in their very different physical environments. The app is probably self-explanatory, but it is not a wormhole to those other locations. You don't magically get to see them interacting with the same piece in South Africa or in Canada or in Israel. But it is wonderful to take a moment as you are engrossed in this, which you absolutely will be if you have the opportunity to experience it, and sort of step back and think, you know, at the same time, as part of this global project, visitors to other institutions are engaged in the very same exercise, engaged with the same work, and considering the same related issues. And it's a really wonderful, exciting, and at moments almost sort of humbling experience to have. And it's one of the things that is really unique and special about this exhibition. Kelsie, you want to talk us through the next piece?
Yes, so Sarah Mayo-Haas's piece, Dawn Chorus, is the fourth piece that you'll encounter on the path at Historic Spanish Point. She's a relatively young French-American artist who works in several different disciplines: film, photography, performance art, and sculpture. And her piece, Dawn Chorus, is one of my favorite because I think it's one of the most whimsical and kind of ethereal. And it's relating music, which is created by humans, which is represented with a piano, with the sounds of nature symbolized by birds. And we've placed this at the pergola near the lawn at Historic Spanish Point. If you want to go to the next slide, David. So here's a concept of her piece, which shows a piano with birds flying around the instrument, kind of plucking at the chords inside the piano. And again, another fun aspect about this project was that we didn't see the final pieces while we were selecting where they were placed. So we had basic concepts and ideas, and we had lots of conversations with the curatorial team, but we were curating this along the same time that the app was being developed and the artists were developing their pieces. So it was a really unique experience, one I never thought I would have when I joined the team at the garden here, but it was, really fun to kind of project and imagine what was being created based on just simple drawings, and then being able to see the final piece in the app was really exciting for both David and I. So here's a screenshot of what you'll see. So this is one of the pieces you'll definitely want to have your volume on, and it's a really nice piece that involves instrumental music playing, and it's just a peaceful moment that you can experience at the garden while you're viewing this artwork. Anything you'd like to add, Hannah?
Only that that each of these works use different augmented reality tools, and this one is motion censored. So when you place the work, a hummingbird actually appears on your screen and should lead you to the playing piano, and that's a really special moment. So I would recommend that if you're going around, that you choose a time to see this when very few people are there, because this really is a moment where it's playing this incredible music, and you might want to find somewhere to sit and just listen and watch the hummingbirds play the piano. That's it.
Thanks, Hannah.
Another one of the works, and one of my personal favorites, is the work of Hannah Rendell, Machine Hallucinations, Nature Dreams AR. Hannah Rendell is a Turkish artist and director based primarily now in Los Angeles, and his work, heavily sort of steeped in augmented reality and in artificial intelligence, it challenges the possibilities that computing presents to humanity. And challenge and possibility is a good way of thinking about it, because obviously it opens up all kinds of opportunities, having these extraordinarily technically sophisticated tools at our disposal. But with that come a whole series of challenges that have to necessarily be overcome. This work is an exploration of the ways in which AI, artificial intelligence, can be used to create enriched immersive environments and stunningly beautiful works of art that really offer a dynamic perception of space. They play with our sense of space and with reality. And we've seen this, as with the Mayo-Haas piece, in an earlier example when we were talking about AR and its capabilities. This is one Kelsie mentioned, that the placement of these works was sort of running in parallel with the final development of the app, and in some instances, the finalization of the works themselves. So this is a piece that actually evolved from the early beta version to the final version that visitors now experience. And it's a really extraordinary piece. It sits in a frame. It is three-dimensional so that you can walk around it. It has a sort of solid back. So it's like a floating shadow box. But it is incredibly beautiful and dynamic, because the field that you see here is a sort of morphing composite of nearly 70 million individual images of nature that have been kind of endlessly compiled and sort of reconfigured through the use of artificial intelligence. And this is another one. In the case of the Meohas, it's the visual, but it's the audio. And this, I would just encourage you to get kind of lost in the color and in the texture and the pattern. It really is sort of mesmerizing and almost hypnotic experience. And we thought this was a particularly fitting spot with the bay in the background, the beautiful oak tree, and with Guptill House behind. A wonderful, unexpected, but really particularly fitting location for this dynamic piece. Hannah, anything to add?
No, David, other than I can really see this is one of your favorites. And it's so wonderful to hear. I've seen this piece change so many times as Refi changed it. So many times it started off as a cube. And, you know, so it's great to hear your explanation. No, nothing to add.
You know you're onto something when someone activates it and the first thing that you hear is whoa. That's usually a good sign. And I mean, many of these pieces elicit that response, but this is definitely one. I think it's probably the color, the texture, the pattern that just comes as such an unexpected intervention into the space. But it really captivates our audience, and it's fun to step back and watch, knowing what's coming and to sort of see the interaction on the part of our visitor is great. Kelsie?
Yes, the next piece we'd like to talk about is by Sigrid Landau. Her piece, Salt Stalagmite #1, 3 Bridges, was one of the first artworks that we saw on our end that was being developed kind of at the early stages of the app. From my understanding, it was a concept she had wanted to make in a physical reality, and it was adapted for the augmented reality app. So Sigrid Landau is an Israeli artist, similar to Ai Weiwei. She addresses social, historical, political, and ecological issues with her work. The piece touches on the notion of the bridge as a means of passage and connecting people and cultures to achieve peace, which I think is a really nice sentiment, especially thinking about the pandemic that was happening during the time when this was being developed, and the way that we all connected with International Gardens and with Hannah and her team on an international level, with many Zoom calls and emails back and forth and WhatsApp messages. The fact that we were able to see this project through fruition successfully, I think when I think about the whole project, I think about this piece initially. And this is one of the pieces that isn't initially obvious, but one that I invite people to really discover. It's quite large, and we've given it a lot of space in the site to interact with. And I invite you all to get as close as possible when you're on site at Historic Spanish Point. This theme, or the material of salt, is something that she works with, and she has a series called Saltworks. David, if you could go to the next slide. This is what the artwork looks like on site. This isn't from our Historic Spanish site specifically. This is from another location, but you can kind of get a sense of the scale if you look at the trees behind it, how large it really is when you activate it on the app. And these are her physical salt works that exist that I was referencing. These sculptures made out of salt are really beautiful. And that fact that she was able to adapt this physical work into an augmented piece, I think is really interesting.
And these are produced by dipping sort of recognizable everyday objects into the Dead Sea. It's sort of a repeated process where the salt crystals adhere to the work and form these rather extraordinary final pieces. Hannah, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I do on this one. So Sigrid Landau actually, much like Kelsie said, symbolizes a lot of the process of this exhibition. And if we could just go back to the slide of her actual work a second. I think it's important to note that out of the 13 artists the curators carefully selected, they made sure that there was a mixture between artists that had used augmented reality to create work and artists that had never used anything. So painters or sculptors and people that had artists that had never even thought about doing something in augmented reality before. That's one thing to note about the mixture of artists, is their experience differs with the technology themselves. The second thing is that the artists themselves were from many, many different backgrounds and countries and cultures, but that they all experienced or looked at the notions of the environment in their work. That was very important. Now, the first artist we decided, because we'd never used this technology ourselves before, we decided to choose one of the artists that also had never used augmented reality before. And so Sigalit, who we'd already worked with at the Gardens before, and she's one of Israel's biggest contemporary artists, and she exhibits all over the world, her SALT series. She really hadn't. Even getting her on a Zoom call was a challenge. So for her to undertake this experience, but she'd had a dream forever to create a salt bridge that went from Israel to Jordan. And obviously that physically wasn't possible. Politically also probably would be an issue, but physically was definitely a problem. So the notion of being able to do that in augmented reality really got her excited. And then we said, okay, but it's in a botanical garden setting. So now, you know, we don't want a bridge. We don't want one big bridge. It doesn't make sense. So she started to explore this, the salt water and the sweet water of botanical gardens, and make this fountain that still had her bridges in there. She's still got her bridges in there. But this was the piece we saw from start to end, and is actually, in augmented reality terms, probably one of the most complex pieces. So yes, like Kelsie said, I would really, really recommend that even though it's very large and you might need to place it a few times to get it right, it is most definitely worthwhile walking into the water, walking up to it, watching the water trickle down it, and even going inside to the second land that she's created inside of this water fountain.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary experience, and one that if you don't know what to expect when you kind of morph through that central element into this other world, it's startling and mesmerizing, and you just want to turn around and do it again to make sure that what you've just experienced was in fact you know, an experience and not a figment of your own imagination. But it's a tremendously dynamic piece and one to spend time with for sure. Kelsie, anything to add? All right. One of my favorite artists is Ellen Atsui, a Ghanaian artist based now primarily in Nigeria. And I've had the pleasure of seeing his work in different locations around the world. And he's best known for what are referred to as bottle top installations or constructions. And I have often thought of them as tapestries, but they're really kind of sculptural elements consisting of thousands of pieces of recycled tin and aluminum that are sewn together using copper wire. A way to think about it is that it's like mail, all these small sections that have been woven together to create a kind of cloth-like fabric that either hangs in a tapestry-like way on the wall or can be draped over something to form a sculptural element. This work, like the Ai Weiwei piece, began life as a physical piece, as a physical work dating from 2014, and it has been converted into AR, which is a far more complicated experience or process than I am suggesting. But it's more than just simply a 3D scan of a piece, because to make these fully interactable, they need to basically be reprogrammed. So in the case of the Ai Weiwei, you can step into it and the parts move. In this case, the elements almost sort of flitter and float, as if they're being blown by the breeze, you know, moving its way through the open spaces of historic Spanish Point. So it's active and dynamic, and really stunningly beautiful. This is one that I would encourage you to go up to and look at in detail, because you see It's this sort of recycled material, but it has this really beautiful jewel-like quality when it comes together and is formed into these fabric-like elements that I will show you now. So this is the original physical piece. I believe this is from an installation at the Royal Academy of Arts in London. And what I love about this is you can very clearly see with the large sort of orb-like work on the left that it's suspended from the ceiling. Had a conversation with Kelsie and some colleagues this morning about how we're going to suspend some things from a ceiling in a couple of weeks' time. But when you, of course, move this outside, the wire is still there, but of course the wire goes up into nothingness. But it does add something because it really gives you the sense that it is suspended. But you can walk around it. I love looking at this with the lush tropical landscape behind. And this is one of the pieces where I often have that thought about, you know, at this very given moment, you know, someone somewhere else in a vastly different physical environment may be interacting with the same piece. And I wonder, you know, what their response would be, because this has such a sort of distinctly Floridian backdrop to what is a really extraordinary and international piece. Hannah, anything to add to that?
Nope.
Kelsie?
No, great job explaining that one.
This is also one, when you go and visit, it's a highly exposed area. And for whatever reason, Kelsie and I kept walking the grounds in the order that we had laid out on the map. And this is the 12th of 13 pieces. So this is where heat stroke generally started to set in when we would go out in August and early September, and we would need a bottle of water and have to go home. But it is a beautiful location near the picnic area, and just sort of at a perfect juncture there along two major paths on site. And from 12, we end with 13.
Yes, and a good point there about the heat. Right now, even though it's a little chilly here, this is probably in the next couple of months the nicest time to go visit the site, though it does run until August 2022. If you're able to brave the heat, definitely come out in the summer months, but now is probably the best time to view the exhibition and really spend time with each of the pieces and explore them and give them the designated time that they deserve to be seen. With that said, the last piece by Mohammad Kazem is Directions Zero. Mohammad Kazem is an Emirati artist from Dubai, and the number 0 kind of represents coexistence and peace. And it's almost like a passageway. It's a very large piece that almost is like an entrance, but we like to think of it as an exit. We thought it would be a nice piece to experience at the very end. And similar to the other pieces that talk about peace and coexistence, the number 0 kind of reminds us all that at the very basics of our humanity is we're all people and we're all the same at some basic level. And what's really interesting about the piece, when you see it up close, it has different numbers that signify different important dates in world history, and similar to how we use GPS coordinates to cite the works at our site, it has different GPS coordinates all around the piece. David, if you want to go to the next slide. So this is, again, an initial concept that we saw, and we were provided with a list of artworks and dimensions. And we saw this drawing, and on the piece, it said, the information, it said 15 meters. And we were thinking, I think this is a bit bigger than 15 meters. We couldn't really wrap our heads around the two different information that we saw, but we were really excited when we saw the final piece in the app. It's just as kind of beautiful and imposing on the site right at the exit point of the path. It's really neat to see up close and to experience people activating it for the first time. With all the other pieces, you're kind of expecting something that fits within your screen, and this piece kind of goes beyond your screen, and it it kind of forces you to step back to take it all in, and really experience it and view it on the phone or your tablet. And that's the piece itself. So if you've been to our site, you can see that this is the exit path and traditionally the entrance path to the garden. But like I said, we thought it would be a nice piece to end the experience with. Hannah, do you have any background information to add about this piece or information about your experience working with the artist?
Yeah, so for this piece, actually, at the start of the project, Mohammed Kazim was one of the artists that the curators chose. And I happened to be going to Dubai for a conference. So I asked him to meet me. And I met him and he showed me, if you just go back to the previous slide again, sorry. He showed me the artworks, he's these great big books. And this, like land dream of his, that he'd never been able to actually create. And he showed me this picture and he said, this is a picture that I created of a work that I would love to do. And I came back, and because again, I'm not a curator, I didn't mention this piece of work in particular, but I told the curators, yes, meet with him. He wants to be part of this project. He's wonderful. So they met with him and he sent them all his portfolios and they chose this piece of work, which made me so happy because it just seemed perfect. When this work actually contains all of the GPS coordinates of every location in the world, every country in the world. So it was very much about peace and very much about walking through it. You know, as you walk through it, we're all on equal ground. We're all walking through and we're like starting again from zero together. That was his feeling about this. And he was one of the artists, along with the curators and the tech team. You know, the Tal wanted to do many things with this and wanted to push him in many directions to make this even more interactive. And he really wanted to stay true to the original concept, which is what happened. When this was, Kelsie said, when the scale of this was first came to all the gardens on the app, the first beta version we all tried, it was so big that you couldn't even see it. We had no idea where it was, and you looked up to the sky and we had to get him to agree to make it small enough that the gardens could actually put it somewhere, because no one could even fit it in their gardens. So now what you see is much more manageable. It's still big enough to cause an impact, but you can actually experience it. But these are definitely the things that we were dealing with as trial and error in the different locations. That's it. This piece is really an exciting piece as well. And also, if you read the curator's comments before you experience this piece, I think it makes the world of difference.
This was the initial placement of this led to one of my favorite moments in the process, where I think I'm standing. I usually would kind of position myself where we wanted to try to place the work, because as being the less technically sophisticated of the two, Kelsie would use the equipment and I would stand as the target. And I think I was in the process of saying, I think this thing's going to be bigger than whatever, you know, the sheet said it was going to be. And all I see is Kelsie with her phone. And then she just starts looking up at something that's probably the height of a 3-story building. Yep, it's quite a bit bigger than, but it's an amazing piece. It fits beautifully in the space. And that sense of monumentality, I mean, you really experience that in full, and it adds something tremendous to the overall exhibition. And it was a great. This is another one where we learned a lot through the placement, and it's great fun to watch our visitors interact with it. Not as they enter the site, but in this case, as they begin the next stage, as they leave this experience and carry it with them in their daily lives. So here it is again. And then what we have to sort of wrap it up before we'll take some questions is this wonderful video that Hannah provided of a kind of sneak peek of all the works. And the video is wonderful because it shows you the works in motion in the way that our still images didn't quite do justice to. Great. So this exhibition runs at Historic Spanish Point in its current iteration until August 2022. As we mentioned earlier, you can download the app in advance of your visit. It takes a few minutes to download, so it's good to be ready to go when you arrive. And you can download the app from the Apple Store or from Google Play. We pretty much have come to the end of our presentation, but there are a number of questions, and I would imagine that Kelsie and Hannah would be happy, as am I, to answer any questions that you have. With that, I think I'm going to stop sharing the screen so we can see you, and happy to take the first question.
Yeah, definitely. So one question that came in through the chat from Linda Robertson was, are there any photos you can share of the works shown in other gardens? And I believe in that video that you just played, those were some images of the artwork existing in the different partner gardens. There was also a hashtag that came up, hashtag Sing the Invisible. So if you're on Instagram or social media, other apps like Facebook or Twitter, if you follow that hashtag or you look it up, you should be able to see photos that other people, visitors to the partner gardens, have posted with that hashtag. It should all connect there. One question is, will there be people on site to assist with the technology? That's a really great question. Before the exhibition opened, we found a team of volunteers who were interested in learning about the app before it was released, and David and I had an afternoon with them on site, kind of walking them through the app and answering questions. So the Welcome Center team, the guest services team at the gazebo can help get you started, as well as different volunteers that are there throughout the garden site. And thank you so much to John McCarthy at Historic Spanish Point and Caitlin and their entire team for really just kind of taking on this new exhibition and making it work for all of our visitors that make their way down there. I'm scrolling through to see if there's other questions. One question, are we considering extending the exhibition, or are other botanical gardens eager to host this exhibition next? Hannah, maybe that's a good question for you.
Great question. And yes, we are. We're going to extend it for another year and have invited several botanical gardens. This year, we had it in 6 countries, and we would consider it a big success if we could have it in some non-English speaking countries as well, and transform that app into at least one other language. So far we're getting interest forms in. Mary Selby will probably be having the exhibition also for another year. We're going to find out for sure. And we hope to also include some different artworks as well. But just like last year, there's a lot of moving parts. But if anyone's from a different botanical garden location and would love it in their botanical garden, then please reach out to them and tell Mary Selby also.
Great, thanks, Hannah. A couple questions about accessibility. Is the exhibition accessible? We do have different trams on site. I believe they have to be rented in advance, but if you're needing anything specific, I recommend reaching out by email. You can find the information on the website, or giving the Welcome Center a call and discussing specifically what your needs are. Our goal is to make the exhibition accessible for everyone, so we'll do our best to make sure that you get a great experience when you come to visit. A few more questions about the recording for this presentation. We are recording it. I'm not sure the timeline to getting it sent out to all of you, but you should expect to receive it in your email soon. And I'm not seeing any other new questions. Hannah, do you have anything else that you'd like to add? Thank you so much for joining us today.
No, it was a real pleasure, and I want to really thank Jennifer, as well as both of you, and James, of course, for the introduction in the first place. But you, Mary Selby, have been an incredible partner for this, adding knowledge and expertise along the way for the curators, for the artists, for us. So it's been a real pleasure working alongside you and your team. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Likewise. And we're excited to see where it goes next. I see that it's 1 o'clock, so we sort of reached the end of our time. Thank you to everyone who joined us and for your participation. Thank you, Hannah, for your contributions. We greatly appreciate on all levels helping to bring this project to fruition, to bring it to us, and to spend time with us today. Kelsie, thank you for helping to execute this. I would have been lost in the woods without the technological skill to execute without your valued assistance. So I really appreciate it. And we encourage all of you to come and experience it here. And when it's comfortable to travel, to go and see it in some of our partnering institutions around the world, because you'll see familiar elements, but it will be new again, I guess. It would be a way to put it in a totally different environment. So thank you for your time, and we'll see you in the gardens again soon. Thank you. Bye.